Hello and welcome to Read and React, presented by Fable Table. I am Nik Bowen, and joining me today is the lovely Shannon. We are
Hello.
continuing. Yes, hello. We are continuing our read of Dungeon Crawler Carl. You may have seen our previous Read and React where we read live the first two chapters of Dungeon Crawler Carl and reacted to them. Shannon and I decided we're going to just keep doing this, but we aren't going to be sitting here for hours reading and
It was a
reacting.
lot.
We will be reading ahead of time and bringing you this is already getting into like, here's what the new format is. I'll just be summarizing the chapters very briefly, and then we'll just dive into like what happened in a bit more detail, and just talk about the parts of the book that we want to talk about, and be very excited about it. So for this and all future episodes, a spoiler warning for the aforementioned chapters in the title of the episode. I should also throw out there some content warnings, just in case. There is minor drug and alcohol use throughout this series of books, and a moderate amount of gore and violence.
Oh, that picks up.
As you can see in the image here, you can expect fantasy violence and gore, as well as some sci-fi violence and gore.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Anyway, Shannon, hello, welcome officially to the show, co-hosting with me. How are you?
I'm so fucking delighted to be here. I can't express to you how happy I am that you decided to read this series.
Yes.
It is something I read very recently, but I feel like, you know how sometimes when you don't know that a book is your favorite until, you've waited a couple of years and then you keep going back to that book. I don't feel that way with this one. I knew immediately that this series was one that I would reread and read again. I'm just delighted that you decided to read it. It has risen to the much exalted position of like top 3 series of all time for me, because it really hits all of those sweet spots for me,
Yeah, I feel like this is gonna hit. It's probably not going to be like what I consider to be like the greatest writing. Like, no offense to Matt Dinniman, the author, but
for
like,
sure.
I don't know if Matt Dinniman is like the great Shakespeare of our time. However, he is masterful with how quick he moves through things, and he doesn't belabor a point, and just brings
I would compare
fun.
him. Exactly. I would compare him to Hemingway in that manner, only because I feel like Hemingway was masterful in that he didn't use language that spoke down to the reader. He used simple language to write devastating stories. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's exactly what Matt Dinniman does. I feel like he doesn't use flowery language. He doesn't. He's not trying to write the next great Shakespeare masterpiece. He's trying to entertain you and express to you the depth of Carl's hatred for what has happened to the planet that we all find ourselves on. His style of writing is very different from China Mieville, which is what we were kind of reading reacting to previously. Very different. I would say that China he tends to be much more heavy-handed with his prose, whereas Matt Dinniman is incredibly action-oriented and just like when you say that, like, he moves you through the paces, things happen so quickly in the story. You're just like, holy shit! Like it'll be you speed through 10 chapters and you're like, I can't believe that was just 10 chapters. That's crazy. It's like so much has happened.
I know. I both feel like these 3 chapters that we read for this week, like, it didn't take me long at all because I read all of them today. And at the same time as, like, I feel like I was able to move through them very quickly, and if I weren't sitting there taking notes for a show, I could have read them in an exceptionally quick amount of time. I also felt like, oh my God, we covered so much ground in exposition and world building, a little bit of action, character development. It's really fun.
I would say that I think that these 3 chapters, and then maybe even into chapter 6 as well, are the most important chapters, not only of the book, but of the series, because it's laying the groundwork. And
Oh
I
my
think that that's
God.
something that Matt Dinniman does really well, because
Yeah.
like he hooks you in. We've all read the kinds of books before where they set the world up ahead of time and then you get into the action, because it's integral that for you to understand the world that you're entering into prior to getting into
Yes.
the action. But Matt Dinniman does it the way where it captures your attention immediately. Go
Yeah.
into an action sequence, and then he's like, let me back up, let me tell you a little bit about what just happened, and then these
Yeah.
3 chapters explain the world at large and the universe at large, and the
Right.
system, and I love the
Yeah.
way he did that.
I have a feeling he is this will come up a lot in my notes, but I felt like at every single point he was like, I'll use the analogy of like setting up pins to be knocked down. He's setting up pins that will be knocked down immediately on the next page, in the next chapter, and like books from now.
Yes.
I like is the sense that I'm getting.
He's a great writer,
I mean, like
honestly.
part of it is because he's so heavy-handed with some of the themes of the economics of the dungeon.
It's really
Carl's feelings about wealth, which we talked about a little bit last time. Anyway, we should get into it. But yeah, I think I'm really excited for this writing style, as well as just this concept of a story, like the premise. The core concept of what this is just so fun and interesting to me as a gamer. So, and as Fable Table is a show very much about finding the fun in games, I think that this book is a really exciting way to look at games and game design through a very like high stakes story.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I look at it, it's a love story to gaming and action, adventure, sci-fi in general. It really does. It hits all of those. I mean, with the exception of romance, right? Because that's my big that's the thing I read the most of. I love a romance novel. There's no romance in this, and I didn't miss it. I didn't miss it at all.
That's too bad, because I'm on the bus home from work today, I was reading the last chapter, and there was actually a line that I'll get to that made me wonder if there was going to be some romance down the line.
No, I wish.
We'll talk about it. We'll talk about it. But I think Matt has left some room for some headcanon and fan fiction if you want. I'm sure.
Oh, you have no idea. It gets there's some of that too.
Okay. So let's just pick up where we left off with chapter 3. I'm not even gonna bother recapping what happened before. If our viewers feel like they're worried about spoilers and want the recap, go back and watch the previous VOD. It is a bit longer, but here we go. So here's the summary of chapter 3. Here's my summary. Carl exploits line of sight mechanics to finish off the goblins and is forced to read the quest lore.
Yeah, that's accurate.
Okay, so Carl and Donut, by extension, have met this rat man, Mordecai, spelled without an H, if you are familiar at all with the spelling of the name Mordecai. Mordecai is fearful. I can't tell if I don't think he's fearful of Donut, but he had kept the door open a crack and Donut had slipped in to Mordecai's room, and has told Carl, "Get your creature. I'm afraid of getting in trouble."
Yes.
So he's both like afraid of what'll happen because Donut has run in, but also afraid that he has accidentally let a crawler in prematurely against the rules. We will later learn that the rules are very important to some people, though not right now as much.
We learn as we go.
So he lets Carl in right as the goblin bulldozer runs by. At this moment in time, I'm thinking, okay, so this is an NPC. The goblins are enemy NPCs.
Yes.
But we saw last time that they like have attitude and like had a language that they talked to each other in that Carl didn't understand, and all seemed to laugh at Carl and something to do with Carl, both goblins and Mordecai.
And Mordecai.
Yeah. But Mordecai lets them in. We get a brief description of Mordecai's outfit, which includes like some pants and a robe, I think. And the detail that really stuck out to me here is that Mordecai has worn sandals. Like, this is not like a virtual projection of a character or a synthetic being that has just been made as a part of that like terraforming effort. No, this is a person who has clothes that have been used and in use for a long time, which is like just further expanding Mordecai as a real person, with personhood and experience, and did not just appear the moment this dungeon was made. And Carl, as he like focuses on Mordecai, gets a tooltip about Mordecai with some useful and also subjective information. It says that Mordecai is level 50, which is surprising, given that a huge inspiration for this was Dungeons and Dragons, presumably. This is not Dungeons and Dragons rules for leveling. This is more like World of Warcraft or any other RPG, like high leveling RPG. So obviously Mordecai is way stronger than Carl, which Carl picks up on and respects
immediately. Yeah.
And then it also describes Mordecai as a hooligan ratkin, which it describes as the smartest, fastest, and ugliest of the ratkin types. Ugliest being very interesting. More of that subjective nature of the system in its description and use of culture. And then I have a quote here. And then let's talk about it. Not as roided out as a rat brute or as I'm a fireball yo ass as a rat shaman, hooligans offer the best of both worlds. Physically strong, and they have a decent grasp of magic. Holy shit. Okay, there was so much so quickly.
Yeah.
Level 50, hooligan ratkin, smart, fast, and ugly. They're strong and have a good grasp of magic. There was so much going on here. What did anything like stick out to you about this description and introduction to Mordecai?
Like my very first read through was, I immediately thought, okay, this is someone who is dangerous to Carl, but also Carl desperately needs their help. So knowing that Carl is in a situation where his world has just been crushed like a tin can under the boot of an invisible giant, he's like, okay, what am I going to do? I got to play this cool. I'm very angry. I need to tone down my anger. But I'm having some difficulty with that. But I know that this person, this NPC, is very strong. He's stronger than me. Carl is very aware of his own limitations at this point. But Carl has also played enough games, like online gaming, that he understands where he sits within the food chain at this point. And he's not happy about that. One of the things, and this is something not specifically related to his race, Mordecai's race, at this point, being a ratkin, but that Mordecai is a shapeshifter.
Yes, let's talk about that in a second.
Okay.
So I am actually glad you mentioned that he is a shapeshifter. which we will get into more. But that whole thing of like he's a hooligan ratkin that has a decent grasp of magic, like that surprised me because like, oh, so he's a rat person, and at the moment I don't know that he's a shapeshifter. And I'm like, okay, that's really interesting that they're describing this NPC as having a decent grasp of magic. Like that's a bit of like dungeon lore building that they're doing.
Yes, absolutely.
Which is interesting to me because now that I know that he is ratkin, this isn't actually unveiling anything about Mordecai. This is actually revealing information about the denizens of the dungeon.
Yes.
On this floor.
Yes.
So this tooltip is in fact completely like it's trying to get Carl and the other crawlers to be like to build quick rapport and familiarity with this individual, but also with the inhabitants of the dungeon.
The races that you might see within the dungeon.
Right.
Absolutely. Specific to the level. There are mobs of ratkins throughout level 1, which is something that is mentioned later. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily. I think Mordecai even mentions that he's like his race or something is a common mob that you find on the first level. Yeah. But it's also mentioned by some of the other players later in some of the other chapters about what they faced on the first floor and how far they've come.
Right.
When he meets them later. So it's interesting. You're right. It is more indicative of the lore of the dungeon itself than about Mordecai as a person, as a character. And you're right. The choices that he used to describe Mordecai and the way he looks, like kind of shabby, this is something that is described later also by Mordecai, but that he is not just an NPC. He was at one point just like Carl.
Yes. So it goes on to the tooltip to describe Mordecai as a guild master, which is exciting because we like there was some, I think, achievements or status or system notifications that encouraged Carl to seek out guilds to learn. So
it's imperative that he find a guild master because he can't open his boxes, he can't open his menu, he can't do anything without first going through the guild tutorial, which, as some people who have played these kinds of games like World of Warcraft know, like you have to have like a brief tutorial session, even if it's just like them telling you click here and kill this thing and you'll get this point. He's going through the same thing, but on a more intensive level, I think.
Mm-hmm. It also describes him as a non-combatant NPC, which they do not go on to explain what that means, despite the insane amount of description of how the dungeons work in these chapters. I mean, I think it is to some degree self-explanatory, but it does not explain like non-combatant to who. Does that mean that the crawlers can't hurt these people for some reason? Does it mean that the monsters in the dungeon won't attack them? Or like, does it mean that they can be trusted to not attack the players? It's not clear, but it is listed there. So we'll put a pin in that. Okay. Carl briefly glances around what is described as the guild hall, which has some interesting contents, like a classroom with a bunch of like seats for what I assume are orientations for large numbers of players. Right now we have one player here, and he will be the only one getting this orientation. There's a fireplace, a bed, shelves with some objects, and some framed photographs of bird-like creatures, which I found very interesting. This to me was like a lot of world building quickly and further characterizing Mordecai as, you know, a person with personhood, stuff he collects, a place to sleep. He's not, an NPC that will just be awake 24/7.
Right.
Right, but in this moment, despite this quick glance around the room, Carl is concerned with the goblins that are trying to kill him. Mordecai is concerned with Donut, and Donut is concerned with being a cat.
Yeah.
She starts to jump up on shelves and knocks over a vase that Carl's new best buddy Morty leaps to catch, crying out, "Mom!"
Oh yeah.
In a wonderful show don't tell humanization of Mordecai. In this scene, Mordecai is just like constantly asserting, like, I am someone you need to not believe is like a video game NPC. He says, "Don't call me Morty, my name is Mordecai. Those are my mom's ashes. I am now realizing I have lots of questions about how he still has his mother's ashes." He curses his own body, saying, "Damn this body, I can't reach that. Can you help me and get your goddamn cat?" So like Matt is doing a ton of heavy lifting to just completely wash away any assumption on behalf of the reader that these are like not real people in this dungeon.
You will find that to be the case throughout the entire series. The system AI is its own entity, and the way that the voice comes across initially is it's what you would expect from a computer. It's like, warning, please read this description before you equip this item. It's very important. Reward, here's the things that you get. But then as it progresses, the system AI's voice becomes very clear as its own personality begins to develop. So like this line between what is an NPC that is real, quote unquote real, as in, was it created by the dungeon or is it employed by the dungeon, is a line that will continually be blurred throughout the series. And I think it's wonderful.
Yeah, I think it's the theme of exploitation of people by corporations is going to be humongous, or at least it feels humongous right now. So amazing. I am really curious. We'll get to more of that and how that presents to some of our beloved characters, both Carl and Donut, as well as Mordecai. But I'm also already eager to explore, like, well, what about the goblins? What is their relationship with the syndicate, with the Borant Corporation?
Yeah.
I'm really eager to explore that.
So to go back to your analogy of Matt setting up pins to knock down, that is exactly what Chapter 3 is. Because we just jumped from an extreme action-oriented situation from chapters 1 and 2, where the world collapsed. He entered the dungeon because he was freezing his ass off. He was going to die, and the cat was going to die, and he had no other choice but to enter the dungeon, to being, falling into what is an obvious trap to us as the reader, but to a disoriented, freezing human being who's like, what the fuck is going on? It's not so obvious. He's like, what am I doing? There's a sign here. Do I follow the sign? And then he jumps into the alley. He's immediately attacked. And he's like, holy shit, I'm going to die. We have the benefit of like reading it slowly, going back, analyzing the choices that they've made. But like, if you think about it in the perspective of like, if I'm Carl, I'm agitated. I'm fucking angry. I don't know what's happening. I'm confused about everything.
Yes.
I'm scared. I've got a cat I have to take care of. It's like you go right from one thing to another. And he does such a great job of like setting up these pins that he is going to knock down in the next chapter and the chapter after that. And it just kind of snowballs. It's amazing.
Yeah.
You've really picked up on a lot of things, like, very quickly.
Thank you. Um, yes. So while Carl is kind of in a panic, he does recognize he still has these goblins to deal with. He like is looking, the reason he's looking around the room is because he's looking for like a way out, or like trying to assess his sense of safety. He recognizes like there is one door here, and it is back into that hallway where that bulldozer just ran by, and there's still like 2 goblins on top of it. So he quickly power scales Mordecai, or doesn't even have to because the system has told him like, this dude's level 50, you're level 1. And he's like, okay, hey Mordecai, buddy, sorry I called you Morty, I'll deal with the cat, but like, is there any other way out of here? No? Shit. Okay. And he's like, yeah. And those goblins, they're part of a huge clan, says Mordecai. And the Godfather will call on the whole family to come deal with you inside of an hour. So Carl, again, being a man of action, we talked about last week, he's like quick to act. He just like goes back into the hallway. He realizes that the goblins have driven their bulldozer into a wall, and they're like focused on getting it out of the rut. So he's able to just like completely sneak up on them. And they describe like a ladder as being made of bone, like the goblins had to make it, although I don't know when they would have had time, but it was just generated that way, I guess. But Carl cuts his feet climbing the ladder, which will come up actually later, really importantly. And he climbs up onto the murder dozer, which he notes is really large. I don't think it's all that important, but I guess it makes sense if these goblins are part of large clans. He notices a lot of smells and other features like sensations on the goblin, but isn't too keen on those. And he just grabs the first goblin and yeets him over the front of the bulldozer into its spinning saw blades that are pressed against the wall. So that goblin is just dead instantly. And then the last goblin, the one with the pot on its head that's featured here on the cover art, he pulls a knife on Carl, who freaks out because the tooltip shows, oh yeah, this dude is like higher level than me, and he's really fast. So I'm worried. He's like worried about it. I think this quickly teaches Carl like to be careful when dealing with higher level creatures, because like this nervousness and panic comes to mind. But then also what comes to mind is his ex, strangely. His ex's voice comes intrudes into his thoughts and says, you just jump headlong into things without thinking it through. So because
that is super important. That is a really important detail, because that, I believe, sets up Carl's character for the remainder of the book and the remainder of the series, where I'm so glad you brought this up. This is one of those things where you get a sense of Carl and who he believes that he is as seen through the lens of other people. But what you quickly realize is that Carl is just really good about assessing a situation, and then waiting for a desired outcome is not necessarily his strong suit. He's like, these are my options. I'm going to pick something really fast, boom, go, and I'll deal with the fallout. So yeah, like that voice of B where she's like, you just jump into things. You don't think beforehand. That's what he's thinking of now, because even as he's climbing the bone ladder, he's like, what the fuck am I doing? What am I doing?
Yeah. Even
as he's doing it, he's just, he is, as you said, like a man of action. He's just like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to take charge.
It is interesting. This is like a brief moment where I like am hesitating and kind of a little confused with the story, because Carl strikes me as someone who in this moment wouldn't be thinking about like the perspective of his own actions through the lens of someone else who right now he's upset with and doesn't necessarily value their opinion that much. So it is interesting, and I'm eager to see how much his ex's voice comes through and how much of a character she exists through his mind. It struck me as a little odd, as someone who seems so confident and action oriented is like has this moment of hesitation that he then like conjures someone else's voice around in his head.
I think the voice was more of an affirmation of his own
assessment, maybe.
Assessment. Yeah, truly, because I don't think it's not necessarily B's voice that is the important thing here. It's more the thing that she accused him of in that moment, because he's realizing like, oh shit, she's right. I do just jump into shit. What am I doing? I can't believe I'm doing this. What is happening? And he's thinking like, oh my God, I guess I do this thing that I was accused of that I maybe didn't agree with at the time. So it's not necessarily B's voice, but his own perception of how he is seen by others in that moment. And it's just a blip, but it is important because that is something that I think outlines him perfectly as a character, that we'll get to in like later chapters. But
yeah,
in this moment, it is very like, I'm reckless. I'm climbing this bone ladder. Oh my God, I'm fighting a goblin. Like it's all happening so fast.
That's true.
And it's like, I didn't even think about this. I didn't even make a plan. What was my plan? Like there was no plan. It was just like, I got to kill these two goblins. What am I going to do? Got to climb the dozer. And that I think that perfectly encapsulates Carl's character in such a way where it's like Carl he is looking at things in the long run, right? He's like, I need to kill these two goblins so that I can get back to the guild, so that I can ensure my safety, so that I can finish this like tutorial guide, whatever, so that these things don't come back to me, so that I can save for later date. But like the actions that he's taking aren't like, he's not thinking like, well, I guess I should get a weapon. Well, I guess I should put some armor on before I fight these guys. He's just like, gotta kill them, gotta do it quick. And that's really indicative of him, I think, as a whole.
Yeah. Here is the full line. The monster moved much more quickly than I had anticipated, surprising me. I had to remember this was a different class than the last two, and he was a level higher, 2 levels higher than myself. And here's the full line. This was a dumb idea. What was it that B always said? You just jump headlong into things without thinking it through. And there's a question mark on the end of it. Like, is that what she said about me? Maybe she was right. Yeah. So it is kind of an intrusive thought. But maybe I wasn't thinking about how it was framed when I wrote this note down. But it is like him saying, like, assessing himself in the moment. Okay, I had an idea. This wasn't a good one. What was it that she said about me? But then immediately it goes into, I kicked at the goblin with my bare foot. Like, he doesn't linger on it. Both Matt Dinniman does not linger on internal, monologue.
Nope. Just got to keep moving.
And Carl is a man of action. So, very interesting. So I love actually the immediate segue. I kicked at the goblin with my bare foot, blah, blah, blah. The vibrations got worse by the moment. Soon the whole thing was bucking like a washing machine. The goblin was yelling something at me in its guttural language.
Yeah.
You're in my world now, I yelled back at him. You need to speak my language, you weird green piece of shit. This very much struck me as like a you're in America, speak American.
Yeah, exactly. But then that moment is so brief and fleeting.
It comes across as very racist almost.
Yes.
To the goblin,
exactly.
like at the goblin. And then to my surprise, the goblin grinned. I could tell he understood me. The little monster switched the knife back and forth between his hands. You're not speaking your language, he said. You're speaking Syndicate Standard, you idiot slave. They programmed it into your brain. Do you really think you'll survive past? So, Carl is kind of a racist asshole towards this goblin. And like, okay, maybe not racist. But it's not.
bad to say that because like the race thing I think is but yeah, kind of in this moment. I think it's less about
It's just
him
it's
being
more
a
of a remark
goblin
on the way he
and more
thinks.
about
Like,
him being an alien.
yeah,
Him more about like not being a human.
yeah,
Than
yes,
like this thing that has invaded his planet. And he's like, fuck you, you weird green thing. I'm gonna fucking kill you.
yeah,
Absolutely. So yeah, maybe he is a bit racist against the aliens, but it's
yeah. He's
but
like,
it's
"You're on my
more
planet. Get the fuck out of
yeah.
here." And then the goblin takes the moment to kind of one up him and share a bit of unwelcome truth that actually you're wrong. You're speaking a
Yep.
language you don't understand, idiot.
You're not even speaking your
Um,
own language, asshole.
and then kind of like does Carl a little favor by explaining, like over explaining, like they programmed it into your brain, probably something he didn't need to do, and also put him at a disadvantage where Carl's gaining knowledge and buying time.
Mm-hmm.
And the time is bought because the goblin never finished the sentence. As he was distracted by his own soliloquy, I leaped forward. Um
So
so
again, that becomes a pattern later within the book where monologuing, as they call it, is heavily frowned upon, even when a moment of sweet justice is about to be delivered. It feels like
it's not worth
I
it. You're
just
playing a
wanna
video game. There's no room for it.
exactly just kill it, just kill it, whatever it is, kill it.
There
Don't
are no
spend a lot of
cutscenes
time.
in real life.
No cutscenes, exactly. So like, but in that moment, that's exactly what that goblin is doing, and he's like, "Well, fuck it, he's still talking. I'm gonna kill him." Like
Yes,
while he's distracted with his own whatever, his own thoughts, dead,
exactly.
immediately dead. But I wanna say the important part about where the important part about the way that goblin died is that Carl killed that goblin, the leader goblin, by jumping from the dozer
Yes,
and
yes,
squishing it with his 2 feet. Now, and then at this moment in the story, Carl also describes to the reader, right? This is
yes.
important. I'm kind of a big guy. I'm 6'3". I
We
put
get,
on
yeah,
muscle easily. Like you get more
yeah.
about his physique in that moment, and then the ensuing like
We
what
get,
happened was that I jumped on this goblin, and it was like jumping onto a fucking raspberry jelly donut, and it
I,
exploded out of all of his orifices. Like
I,
you're getting the impression of something very large, bodily jumping on something very small, and just demolishing it.
yes,
But with his feet, it's important. Feet are exceptionally important in this story.
yes, because Carl A just hurt his feet, and
Mhm.
doesn't have any shoes, or he does. They're just Crocs that don't fit him.
I think
Or
those are gone at this
Oh,
point.
are
He
they
is fully
lost?
barefoot.
That would
Mhm.
make sense if he was trying to run away from a gobdozer. I wrote, we get a brief family genetics lesson about Carl's family and their muscular and tall nature as Carl Gallagher's the watermelon of a goblin.
Oh, I love it. Yep, absolutely. Yes,
um,
he absolutely did that.
and then something happens that really excites me, and that is that Carl starts to feel nauseous or ill about it. The maybe it's the fact that he's killed, maybe it's just the squishiness between his toes. But he for a moment doesn't have a stomach for this. That
No.
excites me. He's not a murder hobo character. Like you just get in the head of dirt for role-playing games or Dungeons and Dragons. No, this is real to him.
I mean,
And he has,
it's real in
yeah,
that he can smell the blood. The blood has splattered
yes,
all over him. He can smell it. He can like see it. He can feel it.
yes.
You can taste it.
That
It's not like when you're playing a video game where there is a screen between you and your
right,
avatar. You know what I mean? It
exactly.
is real to him. So yeah, he's like immediately overcome with like, this is disgusting. I just took a creature's life.
Right.
Holy
Yes.
shit.
There are
He's
stakes for me. Like, can I
Mhm.
handle what I might have to do to survive here? Um, But Carl doesn't have time for that. The system, his interface warns him that the bulldozer, which is like grinding against the wall and overloading the engine, is building up to an explosion. I don't know why the system cares, or the builders, the designers of the game are interested in saving him. I guess they want to see more people survive this first floor. But
not only that, but it is the mechanic of the game, right?
Yes,
like
yes.
whenever an explosion is imminent, you get like a countdown, or something will beep in your interface and
do we know
let you know that.
I mean, this is our only example of it so far, so I hadn't put that together yet.
At some point, yes, you will know that, but this is the first example of it that you will see in the story.
So,
where when things are about to explode, implode, attack, whenever there's about to be a boss battle, things like the system is like, hey, there's about to be a boss battle. Kind of like whenever it's like there's like whenever you meet like a character or whatever, there'll be like intro music and you're like, oh fuck, I'm about to battle this guy. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's exactly like that. But this is his first instance of that, and this is the first instance of that in the dungeon.
Yes.
That he has experienced.
So there is this like constant push and pull that I was experiencing reading this for the first time. As I learn about the dungeon, there's just a lot of like, oh, interesting, that is very helpful. Oh God, that's horrible. That's really mean and cruel.
Yep.
And there's these like very seemingly intentional choices about when to create an advantage for the crawlers and when to omit things and let them learn or figure it out themselves or survive by their own merits. And so anytime something like this is introduced, I'm left wondering like, okay, well, why are they telling the player that? What other circumstances or situations will arise where this will be helpful in? And why do they care if the player knows this or has the opportunity to know that this is about to happen? Why not just let Carl blow up?
It's a good question, and it's a good instinct, because you're right. Like there is this intentional sort of like, I'm going to let them figure this out on their own, versus because that's what makes it exciting. To the dungeon is the action of it. But also, if it's something that they're likely never to have seen before, the AI will be like, hey, that's what this is. This is what this thing is. But
like
it's also kind of like, it has to be entertaining, but at the same time, you don't want to kill everybody all at once immediately as soon as they enter the dungeon. They're weeding out a good amount of people.
Yes, we'll learn how many people shortly. But to me, like the very first instance of it was when Carl starts to go down one of the hallways. There is like a flash right in front of his face that startles him, warning him that he's fallen into a trap that both like kind of saves his life, but also is hyper distracting in that moment. So like it almost got him killed, but also kind of saved his life. Like it's not clear, and it almost seemed like it was a cruel trick.
It was a cruel trick. Absolutely. No, absolutely. So it's like if you're dumb enough to go down a hall that says "the tutorial guild," and get killed immediately, then that is probably the best case scenario for you, friend. You deserve to die, and you will not be good entertainment in the coming levels.
Yeah, it's like a Darwinism thing, like survival of the fittest.
Yes, 100%. Yes.
Anyway, as Carl is learning lots about the dungeon from different sources, both like the system, the announcer, AI, the other announcer that we'll talk about, and Mordecai, as well as just observing what happens to Donut. It's really interesting when the system chooses to be very helpful which means that the designers have made an intentional choice to be helpful. And then we will get lots of moments where Mordecai's like, oh, here's some explanation, and the rest you'll figure out as you go, where he's just like,
there's some things he can't.
Either he can't talk about, or just is like, can't be bothered to go into even more specifics because he has such an itinerary to cover. It's very interesting. Okay.
It's a bit of both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, the explosion happens. Carl manages to get back into the guild and close the door right as the explosion would have killed him if there were not a door in the way.
Yeah.
Questions start to ooze out of Carl like the blood and guts out of a goblin berry. When Mordecai tells him to calm down and shares that he himself, Mordecai, has been in this position before. He says that his world was, quote, displaced. And that he is someone that was a crawler who made it to the 11th floor, and explains that after reaching the 10th floor, there are options to exit the dungeon that improve the further down you go. This is really interesting to me, particularly in this moment. There's the promise of wealth, like, hey, if you know our contract is that if you can beat this dungeon, was it 18 floors? If you can beat all 18 floors, you become not the sovereign, but like you will become the regent of your world in place of this corporation. That's still funny to me that like, no, you're not in charge. You're just a regent. The government still owns it. But you get basically your planet back. So there's like a promise of wealth and power at the end of this, and no options other than like, do you want to participate or not? But now it becomes more complex. It's like, okay, if you manage to get further down, there's actually options. There's this huge promise of wealth and power at the end for those that actually make it. But here are some some bait to settle. If you manage to get far. So those who are capable, who are strong, who persevere and succeed, there's incentive to like abandon the quest and perhaps leave others that they might be partnered up with. It reminds me very much of like Hunger Games. Or not, sorry. Well, I mean, yes, it reminds me of Hunger Games, but it reminds me of Squid Game, where I don't know if you've seen that, Shannon, but after
I just started watching it.
Oh my God. Yeah. But where they have the option to quit. Spoiler for season 2. Sorry, Shannon, and viewer. Well, no, maybe I won't say it, but yeah. That ability to quit after the first game, that like they vote on whether or not to leave, and they get the option to settle, is really interesting. Yeah. Anything to add?
I think that chapter 4 is possibly the most important chapter.
Oh, we haven't even got there. I still have more.
But we are in for the 4th chapter as you've described it, because the end of the 3rd chapter is when Carl like squishes the guts of the goblin. No, I don't think so. I think we get a little bit more exposition before we transition. Let me continue, and I'll tell you when when I think the transition happens. Okay. Yeah, okay. I just checked. So Mordecai talks a little bit about himself and how the dungeons and guilds work, and that the builders of this spend a surprising amount of time trying to make the dungeon authentic and suitable for the crawlers. He explains that they spend decades preparing. Well, not only decades, but like the people that like he has been here since the fucking 60s learning about like human society and culture. He explains that he is in fact not the rat person we see in front of him, but a bird person, Skyfowl, that when he was a crawler became a changeling in the 3rd floor of his dungeon, which I believe is his race. Yes. So he's a Skyfowl, but the shape shifter is his new race that he chose upon the third floor. Yes.
Yes. And he switches every time the guild hall moves to a new world, and as the dungeon crawlers descend to each floor. And he says that he is always transformed into an enemy from that floor of the dungeon that he's in.
Yes.
He says he's not sure why. He says that part of what he does is teach spells to crawlers that choose magic, and reveals that most crawlers don't make it past floor 10. He explains that his true form as a skyfowl is golden eagle-like. Well, actually, he says he's skyfowl, and then Carl, like, looking at the photo, says that he looks very golden eagle-like and even angel-like. And I just found that
the wings are angel-like. Yeah. Yes.
And I found that to be very interesting, like these like descriptions of such a beautiful creature, a creature that can fly, who's free, who is predator-like. Juxtapose that with this shabby rat man before us. It's very interesting. I very much get the sense of Mordecai here and in the rest of these chapters that he is very much been like knocked down many, many pegs.
Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
There's a history there, and you do get to see it eventually. But I don't want to give anything away. It's so hard for
Please
me.
don't. Yeah.
Going back to the first book, after having like been through all of this and like seen all of this, like revisiting the first book is really interesting. Picking up on all of these themes again and just being like, oh man, just you wait. But you're right. I had forgotten that was still a part of like the third chapter, like where he's like, I got here in the 60s. He also outlines like what this was something. Excuse me, I have a hiccup. This was something that we had talked about, I think, in chapters 1 and 2, where first contact, like the announcer prior to them heading down to the dungeon, mentioned something about, because your planet didn't declare themselves as a sovereign entity
within 50 years of first
50
contact.
Years after, exactly. So first contact can only happen when there's a system of government in place on the planet in question that they're looking to capture. And that happened back in... Mordecai says something about when the pyramids were built.
Yes.
So thousands of years ago in Earth's history, human history, I should say, because Earth has been around for a long-ass time. But human history, it's been a few thousand years. That was when first contact happened. And these were primitive people as far as we are concerned. They may have had like this great civilization, but they were still shitting in a ditch. There was no plumbing. So, they didn't declare themselves a sovereign entity because they didn't have the means to do so, or they didn't think that it was necessary, or maybe they didn't read the fine print on the contract, whatever the case may have been. On that, but that's how the syndicate, that's how they get around that, by seeding these worlds with humans or skyfowl or whatever the race may be.
That's really important, and that's how this chapter, the first chapter of this set ends, is Mordecai's like, this isn't my first rodeo with humans.
Absolutely.
You always want to know why things are, because Mordecai's explanation just starts getting Carl to ask like, well, why is that? How does this work? Why? And he's like, you humans, like, you always want to know why. You're just like, you need to learn to just accept your circumstances and move on. This is probably why humans fail in the dungeons like all the time, and Carl is just like flabbergasted at this.
But this also, it's important if you really think about it too. Like, the system is set up to ensure the failure of the participants, because they're like, well, first contact happened thousands of years ago. You had all this time, so you're fucked. You're absolutely fucked. And they're just they know that these are primitive people. They wait for these opportunities to be like, well, we gotta they probably have a spreadsheet where they're like, well, this world is, up and running now, but they're still pretty primitive. We should go and make first contact now so we can harvest them later,
Right.
And this is a system that has been in place for a very, very, very long time. This is the greater universe at large.
Right.
So he was fucked right from the get-go. Like, they never had it. We humans never had a chance. Ever.
Yeah. My summary for chapter 4 is macroscopic exposition, tutorial on role-playing games and streaming, and then employee orientation.
Yep.
And it picks up right where chapter 3 leaves off, explaining like, there's human seeded worlds and 5 other basic species around the galaxy, although on other pages it says universe, where the syndicate sprinkles people on planets like seeds, wait a couple thousand years, see what grows before first contact, where they, quote, reveal themselves to the largest settlement. They usually do this as soon as civilization starts to take hold, but long before any sort of, quote, industrial revolution. As long as there's a working government, this counts as first contact. In a legal sense, I mean, which gives them leave to wait a couple thousand years, come back and strip the planet dry. So my question at this point is, well, why, if they need to mine these minerals, why are they populating the planets? Why not just mine them bare?
Well, this is the question
and it must
that is answered immediately.
Yeah, well, is it? Let's keep going then.
Is. Well, it is. And so the quote that I have in mind.
I know. Well, okay. Yes. I know why they go to the planets once they have humans on them, but what the humans have to do with the minerals is unclear to me.
The minerals have nothing to do with it. That's a very small part of it.
Yes. So we'll get to that here in a second. How do they do that? The mining, Carl asks. And his Malachi's explanation is like, well, technology is so advanced to you, it's basically magic. Like in The Wizard of Oz, except you'll never see behind the curtain. And Carl goes, wait, what? You've seen The Wizard of Oz? And he's like, yo, we've been here since like The Hobbit, punk.
We've been here a long time.
I got here in the 60s and we've been here a long time. Our first contact was back when those, I think, pyramids were built. Yep. But and then he goes on to say, and I think this is really important too, they've been so backed up that it's taken this long to get to Earth. Yeah. So, and in my head at this point, I'm like, okay, so this is such an advanced society and technology that they can flatten a planet in less than a second, but not so advanced that they can't mine all of the planets they need to all at once, or like there's a choke point in the system.
The choke point is the crawl.
The choke point is the crawl.
Yes.
And it's the crawl that's more important than the elements and minerals. Yes. Go on. Please go on.
All the money is.
Yeah.
So the quote that immediately follows this explanation about 50 years or so after first contact or whatever. And then Carl's like, so they're mining our minerals, blah blah blah. The thing that really is the most important part is when Mordecai says that's not why they're really here. While Boren does make a profit on the mining, the real money is in the game, the dungeon. Because and that's it. That is the quote.
Yeah.
That is the premise of the entire series. It's like, we can crash your planet. We could suck it dry and take all the minerals and then get out of here and make it tidy.
Yeah.
Turn a tidy profit and then just keep going and finish our backlog. But there's money in it, but there's not real money in it as far as the rest of the universe is concerned.
Yeah.
The universe as a whole, right? Because it's a game. They want to take the people of the planet and pit them against one another, against goblins and skyfowl and ratkin and slimes, and like put them through this dungeon. And what the next most important part of this whole explanation is when Mordecai is like going through he goes through the process of like activating or helping Carl to activate his menu where he can see his own stats, and then he's like, okay, this next screen is the single most important menu of the entire game.
Yes.
Your life depends on these numbers. And then the list is like ratings, views, followers, favorites, patrons, right?
Right.
And that immediately sets up like, okay,
you're a streamer, you're a content creator now, buddy.
You're a content creator now. People are going to be watching this shit that you do. People are going to be following you. They're going to want to know what you do when you're in this dungeon. You're going to have patrons. There are going to be governments and planets and entities in the universe at large that will send you swag and weapons and healing potions and whatever. And as long as you are well liked and well watched and making money,
right,
then that gravy train will keep running.
Yes.
Right. And that's the thing that will keep a crawler, a participant of the dungeon, alive.
Yeah.
More so than their own abilities or skills or whatever. Being likable, being watchable, being entertaining.
Yeah. He says views, followers, favorites, and patrons, they're all 0. Well, he didn't say that. That was just the menu or the stats. It immediately reminded me of the Hunger Games, where the games began long before the actual live event. You know, it's about like, what are you wearing to the parade? You know, how do you appear strong or likable when you're being selected to be your district's representative? You know, how are you getting support, sponsorship, being marketable, networking? Like, who is your coach?
The first thing they did. Yeah, exactly. The first thing they did whenever Katniss went into the games was like to scrub her down and to pluck all of the hair from her body and to like, you know, give her a
get
facial
under her
to
fingernails and get the dirt
she was
out.
Filthy, you know, but like they wanted to make her pretty so that whenever she was on TV and she died, she looked beautiful while she was
dying.
Absolutely.
So he goes on to explain floor 1 is not even televised. They'll just be like highlight reels and commercials and featured crawlers from it during the premiere of the show, or what he calls regular update episodes, where featured crawlers will get billions of views, millions of followers. The people that stand out are the ones that get a lot of support. You need chutzpah or the it factor. Maybe do a catchphrase or like make sure you're killing things in really performative ways. During my crawl, I managed to accumulate almost 30 million followers and 4 patrons. That's the only way I survived. Mordecai is Haymitch. He's Woody Harrelson.
He is, exactly, yes.
He's like washed up, beaten down, former participant in the Hunger Games.
Absolutely.
But who knows how to win.
Of an alcoholic.
Yeah.
But he does know how to win.
Yeah.
Absolutely,
Exactly. So,
and as you'll see going forward, like sometimes the advice that he gives, it's good advice.
Yes.
And a lot of times Carl, and eventually we will see Donut, also follows this advice. But sometimes they're like, gotta take the risk, gotta do it, do it, can't waste this opportunity, even though it might end in my demise.
Mordecai,
you know, there's good give and take there.
Mordecai is the coach that's like, well, you need to be getting your sleep. You need to be doing like stretching a lot. You need to be getting lots of rest. Coach, I just teach me how to throw or catch a ball or kick a ball. Like I need to know how to play on the field. I need to know like how to win a game or score points. And Mordecai's like, no, you've got a season to play, buddy. You've got a career to think about. So
man, no, very, very astute assessment of Mordecai, and especially like the Haymitch aspect of it, like a la Hunger Games. He is very much like, you know, kind of over it at that point. And I Haymitch in the Hunger Games was very much like, he was an alcoholic and nobody from District 12 had ever won. And it was just kind of like, he was resigned to the fact that every single person that they sent to him was going to die. And he was like, I'm not going to become invested in these people. And that's very much where Mordecai's at this point. When he meets Carl, he's like very dismissive of him, doesn't want to let Carl and Donut in to the guild hall to do the tutorial, even though there was time, and he wasted that time by not opening the door. And it's kind of like, well, fuck it, you're gonna die anyway, guy. Like, why do I care? Very dismissive, just kind of like, it doesn't matter what happens, it doesn't matter what I think you're gonna, he's resigned himself to the fact that every person he meets is going to die.
I don't know if he's resigned. I think he's like, and we'll learn more about why in the next chapter or later in this chapter, but I think he's just kind of like hunkered down, just trying to get through it as easily and risk-free as possible. And right when Carl shows up, there's like some goblins, and he's like, I don't know, I don't want to get involved.
He doesn't want to get in trouble, and that's a big
I need to just get through this, and I don't want to break any rules.
Exactly. That's a big part of the games at large, is that the Borant system, the Borant Syndicate, are always listening. They're not always watching. They're not always paying attention.
Yeah.
But they're always listening.
Yes.
So anything you say can be held against you at some point. So you got to be real careful, because they can delete you.
Yeah.
Just as easily as they can help you. So yeah, he lives in fear of that, and very much lives his life by like towing that line.
Yeah. Exactly. So before getting into some of the heavier, like, you're a streamer now, Harry, itinerary, Mordecai began the tutorial saying, like, okay, here, you can now have access to the UI and many of the features. Let me explain them. Carl, in true gamer fashion, is trying to skip all of the tutorial steps and like open his inventory to get some pants. Mordecai shows him the Fog of War map with NPCs and crawlers and zones and enemies and corpses. He says there's also other kinds of dots, which is ominous. He shows Carl the stat menu that shows he has an above average strength of 6 for a human, above average for a human strength of 6, 3 intelligence, 5 constitution, 5 dexterity, 4 charisma. And that explains that every level he'll get 3 points he can assign, which will improve his stats. But first, before you can do that, you have to pick a race and class on the 3rd floor. He says it's not worth the investment to transfigure you right now, which Carl goes, wait, what? And he's like, yeah, you can change your race like me. And this makes Carl feel sick again and confused. And he's like, yeah, you're changed at the cellular level. Carl's like, that's a problem for tomorrow, Carl. And then we get the classic pause to explain the difference between intelligence and wisdom. And then
it's important,
which is important in games. And then something I absolutely love and had never considered, and that is, hey, here's why they pulled wisdom as a stat. You cannot change it. It makes no sense to change it, because wisdom is based on experience. And if you arbitrarily inflate your own experience, it changes your personality.
Yep.
And like, that's too difficult to do, because humans be humans. People be people. One thing I also love during this exchange is when Carl's talking about like, oh, this is like Survivor. And Mordecai's like, yeah, sure, but actually it's more like Running Man. Mordecai seems to know more about Carl's culture than Carl.
Well, yeah, I mean, he knows as much about the culture as Carl does. He's been there as long as, and longer than Carl's been alive.
Exactly. Like, it's been his job to study it. I just found that really funny that a quote-unquote alien knew more about his culture. Carl has an intrusive thought about Bee, who wanted to be on reality TV and had tried out to be dozens of times. He begins to wonder if she's alive, and then I started to immediately do some mental math that then Carl does in the next sentence, which is go to think, oh, what time was it wherever she is?
Uh-huh.
And he concludes that she's more than likely dead.
Oh yeah.
And that even if she wasn't, he postulates, she would have never gone in that tunnel. He doesn't
No.
linger on this thought and explain why he thought that, which I found interesting. And I don't know. I'm actually interested in learning more about B, because like we keep getting alluded to her thoughts, and not only that, but like Carl's judgments of who she is.
Yes.
So I'm actually more interested in seeing if his judgments are fulfilled because I care about his judgment. So that was interesting to me.
Specifically in relation to the fact that the situation that he has found himself in is A, televised, B,
Yes.
massively popular, like streamed to the universe at large, that he will potentially have patrons and millions of followers.
Right.
Yeah. And he's just like, God, this is my nightmare and B's wet dream.
In a way, yeah.
In a way, yeah. So like, yeah. So it, and yeah, he's having thoughts of B, right? Like that was his partner. They lived together for however many years.
Yeah.
All of this happened very quickly. Him breaking up with B after seeing that inflammatory photograph of her with her ex-boyfriend when she went on vacation with her quote-unquote friends.
Yes.
And breaking up with her. So yeah, like his thoughts are still heavy with like the end of his relationship with the woman that he cared about.
Yeah.
And finding himself in a situation that she would have loved under other circumstances. She wanted to be on television. She wanted to be perceived by millions of people. She wanted to be like loved and hated and admired.
Yeah,
and...
I mean, coming from a show cat family, you wouldn't be surprised about someone wanting to have notoriety and be beloved. Absolutely. and have natural skills that would lend themselves to that side of this. I'm just gonna say competition.
Yes, it is. It is. Yes.
It's not clear yet whether or not that the dungeon is competitive or cooperative among crawlers. Very interesting.
Go ahead and remain mute on that one and let you
sounds good. There is one other thing I actually I have a go back on, and maybe the moment passed, but this just seemed so big to me. So we were talking about how Carl is a man of action, and then he had that intrusive thought about B, you jump headlong into things without thinking it through. And then we have Mordecai grumbling about how he's worked with humans before. Humans always want to know why. Why are you, Carl, asking why? Why can't you just accept your circumstances and move forward? Which is funny because Carl, we've seen, is a man of action who doesn't always question why and will jump in head first. So Mordecai's saying like that asking why isn't going to serve you. Why are you asking me why right now in this safe moment? Can't you just move on?
I think because it's a safe moment, I think that in the heat of the action, he's just like, how do I survive? How do I keep moving forward? How do I live? You know? How do I get past this moment to the next moment? Yeah. But because he's in a safe space, quote unquote safe space, he's like, okay, these are the things that are plaguing me. I have a captive audience. How I need these questions answered because he is human. Maybe these are the hallmarks of humanity, and that it's like we need to know why. We need to know the justification behind it.
And I think in this moment, especially this early in their meeting, I think Mordecai's like, dude, just like shut up and let me get through my fucking checklist here, okay?
Yep. He absolutely is. He's like, that's nice.
And I think
heard these questions a million times before.
And I think that he's reflecting that back on Carl in a way that's like, shut up, dude. I'm the expert here. And I've seen people like you fucking die over and over. Like not people like you, but like all of your people all humans
Yes.
fail compared to
why
people like
isn't
me,
important.
a bird person. So like,
Yes.
shut up and listen to the expert. I'm the one in the
This
Merlin
is your
worn
new
sandals
reality.
here.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. He's like, I am your god now. I am the captain.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm also gonna bring this moment back later and flip it yet again. And this this idea of humans being like jumping to conclusions and jumping in versus like pausing, and the idea of like using time wisely is going to be really interesting to talk about, both in terms of action moments and also solving a floor. Because later he's like, you need to do like be very careful in encounters and fights, but then like use every second you have wisely in a floor.
Yes.
Don't leave too soon. Anyway, we'll get to that. Okay, so let's jump. We're kind of jumping around here, but then so Mordecai goes through. He goes through the tutorial. He goes through the stats. He begins to talk about being a streamer. He goes on to explain. Borant will publish highlights of the first floor.
Yes.
But anyone can watch it. Anyone can watch any crawler, kind of like coming across people on Twitch. You can watch popular people, you can watch people that have no viewers or followers or whatever. Being watched by more than 8 seconds is considered a view by the system, which is an indicator of how interesting you are, which will attract other viewers and attention. We have the TikTok algorithm. If your video captures someone's attention, if they like it, if they comment on it, it's positive. If someone pulls up your video and immediately flicks past it, you're not interesting. At this point, he's been talking about patrons who sponsor people. I'm wondering, well, what's in it for them? Is it like Hunger Games, where they want to see their district do well, or they just really like that person? No, it's about marketing and branding.
Absolutely.
Mordecai explains there's loot boxes in the dungeon, but the best loot comes from benefactors. Views lead to followers. Followers lead to favorites. I immediately in my mind am thinking the Yoda voice: fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, hate leads to suffering. What's interesting is that viewers among the what was it? He says how many planets there are out there at some point. It's like 3 billion star systems in the universe or galaxy that participate in this. He says that there's great loot in the dungeons. Sometimes it's a crapshoot, but the best loot comes from benefactors. So you want to get favorites, which leads to benefactors. However, viewers only have so many people that they crawlers that they can favorite. So it's not like Twitch or YouTube where you can favorite as many things as you want. So that is part of the metric.
Amount.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Anything to add there before I continue?
Yeah, because one of the things that he outlines specifically is that even if you get a gold adventurer's box, a bronze benefactor's box will still, whatever loot you get from a benefactor will be
way
1,000 times better than even the best loot box, even the best adventurer's box or standard gear that you might get like dropped in the dungeon, right? Like for an achievement. So like even like the shittiest benefactor box, is
useful.
Is so much more useful than like a torch and some rope or whatever the loot drop might be that you or like achievement that you received a reward for might be. That is pivotal and key,
right? And it's their form of the patrons being organizations. It's how they advertise.
Correct.
within the Borant Corporation's show. Yeah. So yeah, Mordecai explains the power scaling of loot boxes and benefactor boxes, which makes Carl's and my head spin. Once I do have eyes on me, I might get a loot box with toilet paper in it, Carl says, to which Mordecai says, to which Mordecai answers the question that no one asked but should have been asking. He says, yes, but toilet paper is complimentary. Restrooms are liberally populated throughout the map. And I go, oh yeah, we should have been thinking about food and water and restrooms and sleeping, like, you know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, those basic levels.
Well, and that's something that's addressed also in that a previous crawl Mordecai mentions.
Yeah. Oh God.
That people were, you know, the food that you collect stays fresh in your inventory. It doesn't rot. And that's a really big bonus because in a previous season, like, you know, nobody wanted to tune in and watch a bunch of starving crawlers slowly dying from starvation, and like they had no energy,
or people like defecating or pissing
in the
hallways. He said it caused a problem for viewership, and that the restrooms in this version of the dungeon, the cameras cannot follow the crawlers into the bathrooms.
Only place that a camera will not follow a crawler.
Which is great and, you know, wonderful for privacy, and, you know, we're supposed to feel good about that. I'm already wondering how a crawler is going to abuse this. But Carl moves on to wondering what Borant is getting out of everything. And Mordecai gets very stiff and formal. I think like Mordecai's stakes start to become evident here.
Yes.
He like very not curtly, but he says stiffly, they get mining income, advertising, a stipend from the government, and a commission on every credit spent by patrons. And then he pauses even further. Also, it should be noted that every time a crawler mentions the name of either the interstellar government or the syndicate or the organization sponsoring the current crawl, the Borant Corporation, the system AI will record the interaction for review. If it is found that a crawler is disparaging either of these two entities, especially while on camera with live viewers, the crawler's experience may be accelerated.
Yeah, it's exactly what you think.
I read this in the tone that I use when talking with students, and I'm sharing maybe more information than I should to their benefit.
Yeah.
Or even talking with parents who are like expressing a concern to me about their child, and I'm like, well, because of FERPA laws, I can't even tell you whether or not your child is a student here. But if you know the situation you described to me happened, here is what I would be doing on the back end.
Right.
To like follow up with a student. And if I were able to talk about it with a parent who I knew had FERPA authorization, I would reassure him about this and that. And I'd like leave those awkward, like knowing pauses.
Correct. Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, it's always that you are always being watched and you have to watch what you say, especially about the people who are running this crawl, because if they deem that you are not valuable, and there's no reason for you to be a part of the crawl any longer.
Exactly.
It's no. And I kind of looked at it like from the perspective exactly like what you said, like, but I was thinking of it from like a customer service facing kind of position, like where when you're working in sales or something, or like at the mall, and your supervisor is like over your shoulder, and you're like, I'm so sorry you were displeased with this product. Please note though that, and you're kind of like looking over your shoulder at your supervisor. Right. Please note that, you know, any sort of, you know, we can refuse service to anyone at any time for any reason. So yeah, and it also gives the impression that this is a speech that Carl has given, I'm sorry, that Mordecai has given multiple times before.
Oh yeah.
To warn the crawler, like, hey, anytime you say this will, anything you say, canon will be held against you in a court of law, blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
He's reading him his Miranda rights, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's really concerning. I might have. I'm gonna double check where Mordecai begins to talk about his real stakes. I might have left it out of my notes, but we'll make sure we cover that. They continue to go through some of the user interface. They go over the health bar, where Carl learns that health, like healing, like bodily healing, is hyper accelerated in the dungeon to the point where he learns that he had frostbite on his feet when he entered the dungeon. He doesn't have it anymore. Those cuts that were on his feet from crawling that ladder, gone. He had started apparently to get like a disease from being in the cold, like a cold or something. It's healed. And healthcare in the dungeon is better than it's ever been on Earth. We can't have the athletes getting sick after all.
Absolutely.
So healing is accelerated. You can heal with items, spells, potions, and scrolls, which can also raise your stats. You also, when you transition between floors, get like a full heal. But dead is dead, and then it uses some really interesting language. There is no respawning. Like, they're throwing in the video game language when that's not language you would use in real life. It's very strange.
I mean, for all intents and purposes, it has all of the hallmarks of World of Warcraft or Dungeons and Dragons or whatever. If you die, you can create a new character. You can try again. You can respawn in the same place and try to loot your dead body and pick up your other items that were left on your body when you died. But in this dungeon, dead is dead, because there are 10 million crawlers, 13 million crawlers.
Yes, we do learn that here in a minute. So they go into some of the skills. There's a hundreds of pages long list of skills, most of them blurred out, and you can only see the ones you have. There is the long list of useless skills with like 1 or 2 points includes breathing, walking, operating a specific model of a remote, which Mordecai helps him learn to filter down to things that are not useless but useful, but many still have 1 to 2 points. He further filters it down to things like unarmed combat, guns, electrical repair, swimming, and Mordecai's very pleased with Carl's combat skills, but disappointed that he didn't bring a weapon. He advises that he find one and train in it, and recommends other guild halls, which can help with other skills. But in general, he advises practice is the best. At this point, I'm wondering why the granularity, why codify every single fucking possible thing you could do.
Because it's a way to encapsulate just how thorough and detailed the system AI is in recording your actions. They're in your head. He's speaking a language he didn't know that he knew.
Right.
He can read writing in Syndicate Standard. It's giving him a numerical value for things that are commonplace, and not so common, like tying your shoes or pugilism or whatever, right? It's placing a numeric value on things that have never been graded before, like the ability to breathe. And that's another thing, really. Like it's meant to, it's a system standard, because maybe like your breathing is not how other races oxygenate their blood, or maybe they don't survive on oxygen, maybe they don't need to breathe, right? It's a skill that he possesses, that is inherent to his race, but that is not necessary to be quantified in this particular. It's so thorough.
Mm-hmm.
It's things that you wouldn't think that you're being graded on, but there is a numeric value for it. Everything, because it's not just for humans, right? Like the system AI is meant for everything,
Right.
all things in the entire universe. But it just so happens that they're on a human
big
world
data
now.
is what it is. It's AI creating gobsmacks amounts of data that is mostly useless, but it's just going to, because why not? Could be
over
useful.
The course of decades, as you said, from the moment you're born, you are graded on things that, walking, you were bad at it when you were born, but now you're so great. You're great at walking. You can walk the shit out of that dungeon. You know what I mean? Like, it's another way to show how in-depth the system is and how things can change and progress and how you can become skilled in things that you were previously unskilled in.
Mm-hmm. So, Mordecai goes on to talk about how once the third floor is reached, there are shops that populate the floors. Gold that you can use starts dropping on the second floor. I cannot wait to see Carl's reaction to money and wealth in this system. He shows him the magic menu, which, because of Carl's low intelligence score, he has access to one healing spell that takes 2 magic slots, of which he has 3, and 1 regens every hour. So he can use one spell one time to heal 20% of his health once before he's out.
But that's how it is, right? When you're on the first level and you're just learning, it's I mean, and
Carl's got feet. He doesn't need magic. He's got feet.
He can run. Exactly.
He can just show off his thick thighs. It is at this point that another voice comes on. However, this one is not the male robotic system AI. It is a female voice that claims that the dungeon has been sealed. I don't remember how much time they were given. 24 hours?
5 days. 5 days.
So 5 days have passed?
No. Well, 20. I think it has been something like 24 hours in the dungeon.
I thought he had run in and just like I thought it had been like an hour at most.
No, it's been several hours.
Okay.
Since he entered the dungeon, did the tutorial, fought the goblins. I think it's something like, oh gosh, I know there's like a mention of it. Doesn't matter. They have 5 days to complete the level to find the next stairwell down.
Oh, but they had like an hour or two to decide if they were entering or not.
Correct. It was only going to be open for 1 hour.
But they have 5 days to clear it. So the voice claims 13 million crawlers have entered, and we're already down to below 10 million. So a significant chunk of the community of crawlers has died before the registration had even ended.
Yeah, before the premiere even.
Yeah. Floor 2 will open in 30 hours, it claims. So you can't even enter the second floor for like a day and a half, basically.
Yep.
And that's basically to give time for them to film people on the first floor and promote the new dungeon, is what it sounded like based on Mordecai's explanation from before. The voice thanks all of the crawlers for volunteering, wishes them good luck and a happy crawl.
And as always, kill, kill, kill.
I didn't hear that, or I didn't read that part.
Oh, you'll get there.
Mordecai or Carl asks about how long they have each floor. Is it going to get shorter and shorter? He says no. In fact, it gets longer. Each floor basically adds 5 days. So by like floor 3, you'll have 15 days to clear that floor and get to the fourth one. And he recommends what I said before: use all of the time you have to find items. And I'm thinking to myself, and also get XP, like,
Yes. Yeah.
and it's gonna, I'm already sensing this like push and pull between like, I need to get rest, but I also need to be productive. That like
Yes.
economics of capitalism, like don't waste a moment, is going to like potentially burn people out. But we also have had Mordecai say like the most important thing is getting sponsors. So not only like use your time to level and to find items, but to sell yourself. Like you got to be on that grind to make grammable moments,
Yep.
bro.
Oh yeah. No,
Like,
that's yes, exactly. It's like, like do what you can to stay alive. But you still got to grind. You still have to kill
mhm.
mobs. You still have to get that XP. You still have to level up. That is your job now.
Yes. That is your job is really interesting. I have a quote later here with that in it. Um, So Mordecai goes on to explain that the floors at this point in the dungeon are not even connected worldwide. I'm imagining that they're very like local, in the sense of like maybe like city or state level, and then
Yeah.
maybe floor 2 is like continent level, and then once you get to the third floor is when it becomes worldwide, is what it sounded like,
Ish.
from the
Yeah.
explanation. Each level after floor 3 has a theme.
Yep.
There will be quests and bosses to get to the entrances to the next floor. And then he begins to really open up here, and there's some really heavy stuff. And it's at this point we really get a full picture of Mordecai, and peel back like to second and even third layer of character here. He says, I had barely made it to floor 11 when I saw what guarded the entrances to level 12. I knew it wouldn't be worth it. We know that he left at floor 11 shortly after floor 10 when they start to get options to leave the dungeon. He says he wouldn't say what it was that he saw, even though Carl presses him. He says it doesn't matter. It's different every time.
It is different every time.
Oof.
But more than that, I think Mordecai is also pressing like, you need to get off of this floor. Don't worry about floor 10. You might not even be alive by then. Your primary focus should always just be staying alive this floor and then getting to the next.
Yeah.
And we'll come to that when we get to it. He's like, Carl is trying to plan ahead. He's trying to think ahead. He's trying to like, but the dungeon simply won't allow for that.
Right. And it's at this point that we're thinking like, oh, Mordecai is trying to help Carl and other crawlers prepare to beat the dungeon, or at least get to level 10.
Right. Well, I mean, honestly, to get to level 3, optimistically.
Yeah. I
right?
mean, he's
Because at that
preparing him for
point-
all the stages and how the game is
Yeah.
going to change. And I use the term game loosely, but
Yeah.
like, there's just a lot of preparation, but then there's this just kind of like the defeatedness of Mordecai's really coming through and starting to make sense. Mordecai like continues the orientation. He brings up the party menu, the fact that there's a group chat, and if you start a party, there's shared XP. Because you joined at the same time as Donut, you're in a party now. How the hell is she sleeping by the fire now, by the way?
There's a fireplace in there. She's the cat.
Wish I was her.
The warmest place. Yeah.
It's at this point he brings up like pets, and how like creatures of a certain intelligence threshold aren't considered crawlers, but Donut
Correct.
kind of is. But we'll
Donut
get you
is
set up with Donut
perceptive.
as a pet. I'm not clear if Donut is going to be considered a crawler or a pet at this point. I am a little confused at that. It's fine. And then Carl chooses a moment after getting most of the rest of the orientation to ask, so is Bowen always listening? To which point he says what you said before. Yes, they're always listening, but they're not always paying attention. worry about being careful what you say once you start to have followers.
Yep.
Borant and the Syndicate take their image very seriously. Once there's a crawl every 2 years or so. Borant is in various levels of production of 5 crawls all at once, and they have like preparation teams that go out and begin to like learn about culture and prepare and all the things. He brings up an entirely different company, the Squim conglomerate, that used a different option. I'm imagining when he says that this is like legalese text that's like, your regent has chosen option 3, a dungeon crawl, and it's like the Squib conglomerate has chosen option 2, battle royale fight. Exactly. Everyone on the planet must fight.
Right, and they're all fighting each other.
Yeah,
and it comes down to only one person, one contestant.
This is another example of how I felt like Matt was setting up pins earlier. I asked you this question last episode we recorded. What are these other options? What are those? Are we even going to hear about them? Probably not, but that's interesting to think about. Well, here they are. Here's one. You get one. The first one was free. The second one I'll give to you as well. Buy one, get one. And this to me is Matt like doing that love letter to games. He's talking about like what would it look like for different types of games to be real, and he's setting it in this context of late stage capitalist universe, and he then through Mordecai says, they do a battle royale. It's fun, it's interesting, but it just doesn't sell as well as a long dungeon. The battle royale happens pretty quick. This show is much better in terms of making money.
The more drawn out it is, the longer people are watching, the more they're invested in the character's well-being. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And another thing Matt does really well, I will say, is that things are revealed to you when they need to be. It keeps you interested as a reader. Yes. Because he's not revealing things or giving too much extraneous detail about things that, even though we're interested in them, they're not pertinent to Carl's situation at the moment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He's asking these questions. He's curious about these things too, but It's like, this is my reality. I need to know about my reality. Right. What is my situation? So like they hint at this greater universe where there are other options, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, however many. So you know that this is something that has precedence, that has been happening for a long, long time.
Right.
Right. And it's just,
And not only is it this one corporation or one government producing this, there are many, many, many regents that are not only producing one, like this company is producing 5 at a time. This is fucking Hollywood. Like, yes, exactly. They're not just producing one show, like every 2 years. Like Borant doesn't get to produce one every 2 years, but the show of The Crawl happens every 2 years. And Borant is one of many, and they are producing 5 different seasons at any given time, at very different levels of production.
And those levels of production may or may not be abandoned in favor of whatever is most lucrative at the time.
And they iterate on ideas for The Crawl. He talked about how, there used to be wisdom, there used to be wisdom, but they threw that stat out a while ago. They used to not have bathrooms. Well, that idea didn't work. So let's, the games are constantly changing.
Always.
Which is really interesting. And so we will get all these snapshots of like, well, what if it looked different throughout the series? And they're very prevalent here, especially as they talk about inventory systems, which we'll get to in the next chapter. This chapter 4 at this point like is stretching on and on and on, and it's so much exposition and character building and characterization. I'm kind of getting exhausted, and it finally ends on a really high note when Mordecai says, oh man, let me find the quote because it's really good. My company is known for making the most elaborate, most entertaining dungeons. Wonderful. And you, I asked, are you stuck here for the rest of your life? No, Mordecai said, smiling sadly. He looked down at the framed picture of the eagle creature I had placed on the floor. I think his brother. This is my last tour. Once this nightmare is over, I become a full citizen. I receive a moderate stipend, and I am free to make my way into the universe. Oh, fuck. Okay, so he's just trying to get through this last dungeon because he's, he got through and escaped on floor 11. Presumably, some of his conditions was to he could become a citizen of the universe, of the syndicate, if he put in some work. He's clearly been doing this for a very, very long time.
Oh yeah.
This one dungeon has taken up decades of his life. And he's done many, many, many of them.
Exactly. Yeah. So exactly. It's like they offer you a way out, right?
Yeah.
As a quote unquote reward for having done such a good job and fighting so long and for so hard. These are your options that are being presented to you by the corporation that owns this crawl. And as a reward for that, you can opt out. You can get out right now if you want. And you can become a guild member. You can become someone who helped crawlers just like you. And it's like at that point, maybe by the 9th floor, maybe by the 10th floor, you're exhausted and you're like, I will not survive another level.
Yeah.
What am I going to do?
And Mordecai got up to level 50.
Well, level 50. So that's not necessarily.
Or was his level set important to that as a guild master? Like that's not.
His level is set to 50 as a guild master. So that's important to note.
Okay.
That's something that you'll see across the board when you
all guild masters. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you meet other like non-combatant NPCs, you'll see that they have a set level. Like you'll meet a type of NPC at some point that is an elite.
Yeah.
And their levels don't necessarily go up or down. An elite might be a level 75.
Sure.
A god is like level 250.
A god?
And
whoa.
You'll meet,
okay.
Yeah, you'll meet gods in this game as well.
All right.
So the levels are sort of set for the NPCs at a certain point to be indicative of like what they represent within the game. But the players themselves, and I think that they actually address this in like a later book. Mordecai talks about like what level he got up to. I can't recall what that was at this point, but he was higher than a level 50, certainly.
Yeah.
It just, and it's interesting too because like, and this is what I love about the writing specifically, like what he's doing with this first level, like that fight with the goblin. The fights that he's about to get into in the greater dungeon, they are horrible and hard, and they require a lot of thought, and sometimes there's planning involved, and it's really fucking hard. But then it's like when you're playing like Fallout, right? When you first start, you have no skills. You're wearing like a jumpsuit from your freaking like from your Fallout shelter, and you have nothing. And then however, like 20 hours in, 30 hours into the game, you walk into a bar and you're like a god, and you can kill everybody where they're standing.
I can go into time freeze mode and just headshot like 20 people at once.
Yes,
exactly. with a clip of 6 bullets.
Yes, exactly. But I think that's one of the best things that he does in this is to, as the players and the crawlers are leveling up, like it's still the same level of effort. It's still really fucking hard. There's still a lot of planning. It's just that killing becomes a lot easier and the challenges are different. The killing is still hard, right? It's just that, you know, you're dealing with a much higher level boss than you were on the previous floor. So like you're still putting in the same level of effort, but the outcome is decidedly better. Yeah, God, I love this. I love this book so much. I'm so glad you're reading it.
This chapter still isn't over. It gets worse. Then Mordecai is sad because he's been living a nightmare trying to get his citizenship in a galaxy
for hundreds of years, thousands of years,
for who knows how long. Carl immediately responds to this. With your freedom, will you go back to your home planet? No, he said. It's not open to me. Well, what about the people who didn't go into the dungeon on your world? He paused. We really need to get back to the tutorial. Okay, but what if someone won the dungeon, made it past level 18? The message said if that happens, they gain control of the world. Maybe your world is under control of one of your people. The rat creature grunted. Remember how I said I made it down to the 11th floor? Yeah. A handful of crawlers over the centuries have made it that far. One once made it down to 13. One. He died within a half hour of hitting the floor. He was a human, like you, but from another human world. That's the deepest anyone has ever delved, kid. Level 13.
Yep.
Fuck. Oh my God.
Yeah. And there are 18 levels.
And the 18. No one's ever gotten past 13. The system is fucking rigged, kid.
Absolutely.
The best you'll get is an offer after floor 10.
Yep. That's it.
We got to get you, like, the full picture becomes clear. Like, oh, he's been preparing us to try and get no, he's preparing you to survive long enough until you can get out. Like him.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
It's very sad. The stakes for Malachi are become
Mordecai.
Clear. Or yes. What did I say? Malachi? Mordecai become clear in this moment, and the stakes for every crawler, and what might be possible for them become really clear. How rigged the system is becomes very clear. But here is another moment where that, like, you humans don't do so well because you all ask why. The person that's made it the furthest is a human.
Yep.
Which kind of contradicts what Mordecai said before about humans not performing very well because of their curious nature.
That's fair.
That kind of cropped up in my mind in this moment and was very interesting.
But I think it's also important to note that of all of the other humans on that world, he was the only human left. One.
And he survived.
And he survived for half an hour on the 13th level. And then his world was dead.
Yeah.
Gone.
So,
you know?
It's crazy. It's very sad, but it's also very interesting because, you know, what were that human circumstances in terms of what level they got to, what class they picked, what race they picked? You know, would they have done better if they had other crawlers with them? Could they have all gone farther together? You know, how far did sponsorship carry them? What if they're able to find sponsors willing to invest even more money? Well, maybe Mordecai said that the cost of sponsorship has gotten higher and higher. So is it as easy to get sponsors as it maybe used to be in the lifetime of the Crawl show? Who knows? It's very exciting and scary. I love this chapter so much. It's really dense.
It's the most important chapter, I think, in the entire book, and it sets up the world at large and Carl's understanding of where he sits within it. And not only that, but like it gives you a glimpse of what the greater universe looks like, and they're just as vapid and like, you know, like gluttonous and capitalist as we are. But you also get the sense that, like Mordecai, these creatures that are in the dungeon, they might have been crawlers at one point, and now they're NPCs. They're also just fighting for their own survival.
Yeah.
And it is a running man situation at that point, because it's like kill or be killed. You got to make a choice, bud.
Yep.
Are you predator or are you prey? Are you going to live to the next level, or are you going to die right here? Because that might be easier for you if that's how you think, if that's how you feel.
Yes.
It is the most important chapter in the whole book.
Yeah. I have a feeling this one's going to stay as one of my favorites for a long time. Really dense. It was also, at this point, I realized, oh my God, I still have another chapter to read. I don't know if I'm going to make it to the end of chapter 5 before we record. But thankfully, chapter 5 is not as dense and is much shorter as well. My summary for chapter 5 is it's loot time, baby.
Yeah, it is.
The tone becomes somber, and I think every character and the reader are ready to just sit with what we've got for now, for the time being emotionally. So with a tone shift, Mordecai switches to his last bit of the tutorial. Hey, let me activate your inventory. This season, Borant is trying something a little different. Well, every season, they're all trying something different. And that is that the inventory system has changed. They've changed from a weight-based inventory system to you have infinite space and you've got a VI assistant that's going to manage your inventory for you, which is very cool. This is another instance of like, oh yeah, they can do whatever they want with inventory and designing the game and the rules and the systems. It can look different ways. Here's an example. Here's what we're doing. Moving on. Basically, you can have any number of items, up to 999 of them. They stack. And as long as you can physically lift it for about 4 seconds, you can put it in your space. It's here I wrote, good for you, Carl. You've got high strength. Means more variety of items for you, whereas a weaker crawler would have fewer items they could put in their inventory by the nature of this system, which I find interesting. You can't put living things in your inventory or they'll die. Also, and I think you brought this up before, storage is time locked, so food won't go bad. That's a big one. We had an issue last season with crawlers starving to death, watching thousands of lethargic, unmoving players as they waited for the timer to run out. Yeah, it was no good, so Borant fixed it. Disease and starvation doesn't make for compelling drama.
Yep, exactly.
There is a series of really fun descriptions of items and other achievements that when Carl looks at his notification system, realizes he got and are hilarious. He looks at a standard healing potion. Part of the description reads, doesn't cure poison or other health seeping conditions such as succubus inflicted gonorrhea. So remember to wrap it up, bucko. This is a line that made me wonder if there was going to be, not necessarily be romance, but sex in this setting. The content warning that I found and described earlier would suggest no, probably not. But this is funny sex humor. Mordecai brings up the fact that you have like a quick inventory at the bottom of your HUD that you can like focus on, and it will use the item. With potions, you can either drink them and taste them, or if you put them in your inventory and on the quick item screen, you can consume an item without ever having to interact with it just by focusing on that. So that's interesting.
Which is important because the potions taste like shit.
Yes, and it happens instantly rather than however long it takes you to drink a potion, which I assume takes longer than 6 seconds. Dungeons and Dragons.
Yep.
Yep. Mordecai, I think, finally begins to get excited at Carl's prospects when he sees what
His gear.
what loot boxes he has. He says, "Okay, let's take a look at your current notifications. Holy tits! You have a legendary pet box? Why didn't you say so?" And he's, I just looked at him. The urge to punch him in the face returned.
Oh yeah.
Legendary, right when he walks in, he grumbled. Okay, yes, you do have a lot of boxes. So there's a fun list of achievements. New achievement, you inflicted damage on a mob. Hopefully it won't hit back. Reward, it's probably going to hit back.
Yeah.
New achievement.
My favorite reward.
New achievement.
Oh, no, go ahead.
You've killed a mob. You're a murderer. He probably had a family.
Yep.
Fuck. Which, given what we know about the NPCs in here.
Yep, exactly.
Don't think about it. Don't think about it. New achievement. You've killed an armed mob with your bare fucking hands. Holy crap, dude. That's kind of fucked up.
Exactly. Reward.
There's other ones.
Bronze weapon box. My personal favorite is and one that becomes, and I'm just gonna. It's a bit of a spoiler, but really because
Please
it's just the gift that keeps on giving. It says new achievement. Podophilia. You used your bare feet to crush and kill an opponent. Hey, that's my fetish. Seriously, keep doing it and you'll be rewarded. And then it's like he gets a gold shoebox.
Yes. We'll talk about what's in it in a moment.
Yeah. The AI really has a thing for feet.
Yes. Yes. New achievement. You've entered a guild hall. Congratulations. You know how to open a door. Reward. That sense of fulfillment you feel, that's reward enough.
Yeah. The AI just this is one of the reasons why I specifically for these instances when you hear the AI's voice.
Are these written by the AI?
Yes.
Okay. That's really funny.
They're read out by the AI to Carl.
I don't think I got that. That they're written by the AI. I noted that I was intrigued by the fact that they were so culturally informed, and clearly if like an AI has been studying this planet for centuries, millennia, like it's gonna have a lot to work with when creating these achievements, especially just looking at other video games of the planet and what how they characterize achievements.
But this is one of those things. This is part of the reason. This is a big part of the reason why I think that it's so important to listen to the audio of this, because as the AI develops a personality, as the dungeon crawl continues, the announcements, these new achievements, like and the rewards, they become much more tailored.
Right.
The AI has a voice. It's not just a generic computer reading out like some schlock that it copied and pasted from something else. It has opinions about things.
Right. It really struck me how playful the achievements are in their description. It really reminded me of things like how Blizzard or other game designers will write really silly, fun, playful text for achievement tooltips and stuff. Blizzard, all of their games have April Fool's patch notes that just completely make fun of their games and themselves, which I find really fun. So I think I just assumed that the game designers, the Borant designers were the ones that wrote these. But obviously it makes sense if you're designing millions of achievements and analyzing millions and millions and millions of skills, like you have to use AI to generate that, and so all of these are really playful. And then you get new achievement, level up, baby. You've received enough experience to gain a level. Reward. Leveling up is your job. You don't get rewards for doing your job.
Yep.
You said earlier leveling up is their job. You're right. And it's explicit here.
Yes.
In the achievement.
I forgot about that one.
Yeah, that was
You don't get rewards for doing your job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then it goes into the skills and things. Of note is the pugilism skill that Carl gains for beating the shit out of his opponent with closed fists.
Yes. It also explicitly says how it benefits him. Go on.
Yes. Yeah. It gives him 3 stat points gained because he leveled up to level 2, right? Like that's a big draw, right? Of leveling up and gaining XP is that you can put those stat points anywhere.
Right. So Carl's level 2 from one
strength.
encounter. Yeah.
Exact. Carl's level 2 from one encounter. Exactly. And and one of the other ones too, new achievement, boom. Says you caused a wall shaking explosion within the dungeon. The last time the wall shook like this was when your mom came over for a visit.
Oh, boy.
I know, but there's a lot of your mom humor in this, which I love it.
Classic.
So classic. Can't go wrong. But
it's worth noting that the pugilism one for beating the shit out of your opponents gave him an increase in damage. He does 25% more damage using his fists now as a result of getting that achievement. So it's like the more you use weapons, the achievements will like basically benefit you in addition to the skills and stats, which is an interesting mechanic. Okay, we'll keep going. So Mordecai shares you can only open the loot boxes from achievements and other ways of getting them in safe areas. All guild halls are safe areas, blah, blah, blah. I'm interested why you can't open them elsewhere. Maybe it'll make sense later. I'm also unclear why you must open them all at once. Mordecai says that there's no reason not to. I'm intrigued by this as well and wondering if it'll come up. He goes on to explain that safe areas will always appear on your map, even if you've never been to them. So the fog doesn't cover them, so you can intuit where they are. I'm really intrigued to see how that will create traps or behavior from crawlers to just behavior around where those are and setting up around them and in them and far from them. That's really interesting. The safe rooms will have restrooms, sleeping cubicles, and some will even have food and fountains with healing potions. Getting to them might be hard, but you'll always know where they are if you get close enough. Is there a time limit for staying in one? Nope. But don't forget, the level itself is going to collapse in on your head after a certain amount of time. The only way to survive is to keep moving deeper. So use your time wisely, use it efficiently, use it effectively. Don't rest too long. You got a lot to do. You got to level up. You got to get items. You got to make clips. You can't sell or transfer unopened boxes. You'll never receive outright cursed loot in a box is another mechanic. Just more information about the dungeon. Always read the description before you activate or wear something. Always, always. No exceptions, says Mordecai. So
that's going to turn around and bite them in the ass immediately.
So there's just a lot more achievements, which is fun, and then a lot more learning about the dungeon, and then we begin to open the boxes. I'm just going to quickly roll through the stuff that he gets. A scroll of heal critter, good for you. Donut. Pet biscuits, which we'll learn about in a second. There's potions of healing, common fingerless gloves, a toad cudgel, which is just a short stick, a fireplace poker, another potion of healing, a potion of mana. Great. Carl, you can heal more than once in a short period of time.
Yep.
There is poison antidote, 100 crawler biscuits, 20 torches. In the goblin box, there's dynamite, a lighter, which is great for the dynamite and the torches, and a goblin pass, which takes the form of the same goblin-shaped skull from the top of the box. It appeared floating in the air. Instead of adding itself to my inventory, it flew and smacked up against my left inner forearm. I was still wearing my leather jacket, but I could feel it burning against my skin like I was being branded. The brand also appeared on the exterior of my jacket. The pain quickly abated, and my jacket was otherwise undamaged. This is interesting.
Yep.
What the fuck's up with that? And also, I've noted that Carl has lots of tattoos on his arms in some of the art of the books, including a distinct one of a spider web that shows up in a lot of them.
Wait till you get to that one.
So that's interesting.
No comment.
Carl opens a gold apparel box that has a enchanted night gaunt cloak of stoutness and an enchanted trollskin shirt of pummeling, to which Mordecai gasped, and Carl hoped it was a good thing. The shoebox gets opened. Would you like to reveal what's in the shoebox, Shannon? You were so excited about it before.
It says enchanted toe ring of the splatter skunk. A toe ring? A goddamn toe ring? I need shoes, damn it! Not a toe ring. And then, but then the description of that toe ring you get into later. yes.
I don't think we got any descriptions of any of these quite yet.
No. The box is open. They examine the loot. They see what it is, and it immediately goes into their inventory. And then the next box flies open, and then
so they don't get a chance to inspect it and see what they have.
Nope.
But they are in a safe zone. He is in a safe zone, and you can only open these in a safe zone. So presumably, in most instances, you'll have time to inspect them later. Legendary pet box. Oof. So there are 500 pet biscuits and an enhanced pet biscuit.
Yeah.
What the hell is an enhanced pet biscuit? Mordecai was looking between me and Donut. Yeah, kid, you'll want to give your cat that biscuit right now while you're still in the guild. What does it do? I asked. I pulled it out of my inventory. It looked like a cat treat. It was smaller than my fingernail, brown, hard, and round with a crumbly texture. I doubted I'd be able to get Donut to eat it. While the cat was always shoving her face with food, Bee insisted on giving her the wet stuff, even though it got all over her face. Donut turned her nose up at most everything else. I examined its attributes. So this is the one and only item we get to examine in this chapter.
Well, it's because he opened the last box was the legendary pet box. So now he can pull the item out of his inventory.
So he starts with this. So it looks like a regular pet biscuit. It's not. Feed to your pet at your own risk. What's the worst that can happen? What does it do? I asked a second time. The effects vary, he said. Regular pet biscuits feed pet-based classes for a full day. So he has 600 of these pet biscuits. Maybe 510. I don't remember exactly, but he's got enough to feed Donut for like a year and a half. We do not have to worry about Donut starving unless Donut runs away or something happens to Carl or his inventory. The pets find them delicious, even the basic ones. They smell them and they just gobble them up. So make sure you only pull one out at a time. That Carl definitely has enough for a year and a half, right? He's only going to pull out one per day, right? Enhanced treats have over 100 different possible effects. Half of them are good. The rest are neutral or decidedly bad. But if there's a bad outcome, your pet won't attack you if you feed them the treat while you're in a safe zone. Your pet will be teleported outside to a random place within a square mile of here. A square mile, fuck. That's not going to come up later at all. If you feed it to her while you're out on crawl and she transforms into a toothed flesh butcher, you're pretty much fucked. So you should definitely do it now. Either that or save it to sell later. It's worth a couple thousand gold. And at this point he thinks, oh, maybe I'll save this. This could get me some really good loot. oh, by the way, Donut's a fucking cat, so what am I gonna do with Donut? I feel obligated to protect them. Donut's not gonna be able to help me at all. She's a liability more than anything. And I'm like putting this together with the fact that Mordecai only made it to floor 11. And you know, how are they gonna get all the way to at least 10 and get out? I felt an obligation to her. I was all she had left in the world. It wasn't logical, I knew. But if I could sell this tiny little treat for a lot of money, I could buy some really useful items, like shoes and pants. I rolled the cat treat in my fingers. As awful as it would be best to, ow! I cried as Donut leaped up and ate the treat right out of my hand. Jesus fucking Christ. He like, Matt interrupts the character's internal monologue to just eat this treat that he just assured us she would not eat.
Yep.
Oh, but they taste delicious and they just nom them up.
Cats live by their own rules.
Yes, and Donut, as we've seen, gets these little spurts of adventure that she immediately regrets. So this won't go bad.
It's like, help, I'm in danger immediately.
Yeah.
So yeah, exactly. He's like, I just like imagine him like rolling it in his finger, like the one ring, you know, and he's like kind of, you know, like admiring it or maybe like examining it. And then it's just like, oh, mine now. I'm eating it.
I love, so Carl, we saw he has got like 100 crawler biscuits. So he's also good to go for food. Might not be the most palatable, but he doesn't even need to consume it. He can just put it on his hot bar and just click it and he's fed. But he's like, okay, yeah, I can sell this. I can get some pants. I can get some shoes. Great. Oh, it's eaten. It's gone. Not only that, but Donut leaps in the air, eats it out of his hand, and splat. The moment the cat hit the ground, she was transformed into a wet mess of flesh. She splattered like a hunk of hairy, jellied water. What the fuck is going on?
It gets so much more exciting after this.
Yes. Waiting, ... Waiting in bold letters, which is the system text. Like when the system message is happening, we see bold text on what we're reading. So we're getting a timer. You said that the only time the system like helps with things like this is with timers. So this is our second timer.
Yes.
Mordecai said, coming forward to poke the blob with his foot. It wiggled. Transformation. Your creature is being changed somehow. It didn't teleport away, so it's not considered a negative result. Looks like we'll have to wait. I've seen this before a few times. It won't be long. Maybe 5 to 10 minutes.
Yep.
And that's the end of the chapter.
That's it. So you just have, exactly.
Oh my God. This is great.
That is another thing. It's like when you feel like maybe you've been weighed down with too much exposition, or you feel like there are too many system AI messages about boxes and rewards. It's important.
I didn't even mind those. Those were fun and lighthearted.
They are fun. It's like it gives you a reason to keep going because you're like, well, I gotta fucking know what happened now. Gotta know. And I mean, it's it just gets exponentially better from here. Like, I know we've done like a lot of heavy dissection of chapters 3 through 5, but it picks up so quickly.
I don't expect every chapter to be as dense as these were, especially because like this was just such heavy exposition. I could see all these pins getting set down by the bowling machine, just like setting up lane after lane after lane, and the bowling balls are getting polished and fed up onto the track, just ready for me to start throwing them. So
these were very important chapters.
These were good.
Book and to the series. So yes, you're not gonna. I mean, like that's not to say that there won't be other moments of like heavy exposition, like where you're in Carl's head and Carl is going through different scenarios and like this is how I'm creating this thing, or based on their stats, this is what I think the best outcome, or this is what I think I'm going to do, and and then goes on to describe what happens. And sometimes it's exactly what he planned, and sometimes it is
Yeah.
decidedly not. Um, but yeah,
Yes.
it picks up so quickly from here. These were important chapters to read because it sets up the world and the universe and the crawl as a whole.
Yes.
And it gives you a better understanding of Mordecai, of Carl, and where he fits.
Yeah, and I could see for some readers that the like all the messaging of like how like the of the themes around like horrible corporations and capitalism and gotcha uh you know legalese and contract terms like could be a little boring and or uninteresting to some readers. I'm eating this shit up.
You will love it.
And I just cannot wait. And Matt Dinniman did such a great job of doing all of that legwork of setup in such a fun way. I'm getting so excited thinking about how I can do better world building in this style. So efficient, so effective, so quick. He is not wasting a single sentence in his writing. Really good.
It's excellent. It is. It's so fun. Like that's I in a way he reminds me of. It's kind of like with Stephen King's writing, where Stephen King will introduce you to a concept. Like I can't even think of one like off the top of my head, but like The Shining. Okay. He introduces you to a concept of how Danny's gift works, and that Danny sees dead people and he can like hear their thoughts, and he doesn't have to go into a ton of detail immediately for you to understand what that looks like for a little kid and what they're experiencing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or world building in such a way where it's like, oh, that's the Rainbow Bridge or whatever that we use to, kidnap souls. And you're like, oh, okay, that's the thing, that the metaphysical thing that they use to take the souls from the bodies. Cool, I'm done. I got it. I completely understand that concept. And I think that Matt Dinniman does that too. Like where he introduces concepts that are immediately understood what they are. He'll go into detail, great detail, about a lot of things. That might need that exposition, and sometimes they need exposition, and he's like, nope, that is for a later time. I will explain it to you later. The action is more important now. So it's like it's just a journey. I have no complaints, no notes on this book. I think it is a perfect book.
Yes, I'm very much looking forward to continuing this. Speaking of there are 47 chapters and an epilogue, so I'm just going to say 48 for now.
Okay.
I think a pace of like 3 or 4 chapters each episode will be good, and we'll be done in 15 or fewer episodes through this book anyway. Did you have a recommendation for chapters for next time? If in case we have anyone who's following along. I was looking at some of the extremely brief recaps of the chapters, and I had an idea, but I was also curious if you had come up with anything.
Well, so chapter 6 is like a couple of pages. Okay. We'll do 4 or 5 chapters for the next read.
Yeah, I'm thinking chapters 6 through 9. You and I can touch base and see if we want to extend that to 10, but I think for our viewers, we'll promise 9, and if you want to get a little bit ahead to 10, maybe that would be good. But for now, we'll commit to chapters 6 through 9. There are
6 through 9 is probably really good.
There are no titles for the chapters, but I love the idea of naming the chapters. So, and I'm going to try and do this for every single chapter, and every single chapter title is going to be themed around there being a lack of pants. So chapter 6, the rise, the waist, and the inseam. Chapter 7, no corduroy for young men. Chapter 8, better to have worn and lost than never have worn at all. And chapter 9, Chapter 9, no bunny ears to speak of what's between. So those are our 4 chapters for next time.
I love it. I think 6 through 9 is a perfect. Yeah.
Yes.
I think those will suit us well.
All right. Well, thank you, Shannon. I really appreciate chatting with you about this book. It's very, very fun.
I'm so happy you're reading it.
And thank you to anyone viewing, listening in advance. These videos will be on YouTube. I'm editing the past one, and I'm going to start editing this one tomorrow, and they'll both be live so we can have everyone get caught up on listening in and maybe even reading and joining us for that. So we'll see you next time. Have a great time. We really appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Bye.